Welcome, everyone. Today, we're going to be talking about something that's been all over the news for the past month, and that's DeepSeek R1. DeepSeek is an open source AI model created in China, and the company claims to have trained it at a fraction of the cost of similarly capable AI models, which has people really excited about its potential. There has also been concerns over privacy, and several states have already banned their government agencies from using as a result, and some companies have also banned its use. So there's definitely a lot of like talk and buzz going around this new model. So I've invited these three experts on to kind of break down what developers need to know about DeepSeek. So let's get into it. Instead of trying to introduce you all myself, I'm going to ask all of you to just briefly say your name and title so that people listening on the podcast can sort of tie your name to your voices.
Sure, I can start. Jenna, here's Melissa Ruzzi. I'm the director of AI for AppOmni. AppOmni is a company that does SaaS security.
I can go next. Hi, I'm Bratin Saha. I'm the Chief Product and Technology Officer at DigitalOcean. We are a cloud provider that's more focused on small and medium enterprises, though we have large enterprises as well. We have 638,000 customers in 190 countries. So by number of customers, we're the third largest cloud provider in the world.
Oh, that's great context. My name is Kate O'Neill. I am an author, speaker, and executive consultant on technology's impact on human experience and humanity overall. I have a recent book that just came out called What Matters Next? A Leader's Guide to Making Human-Friendly Tech Decisions in a World That's Moving Too Fast.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for being here. So to start off, one of the reasons that DeepSeek gained so much attention is that it seems to compare well to other models on the market in terms of performance and capabilities, but they say it was trained at a fraction of the cost of those models. So can one of you or all of you feel free to jump in, explain how DeepSeek compares to these other models in terms of capabilities?
I can take a first stab at it. So I think that one interesting part about the DeepSeek, and you read that about how they talk about the models, is that it's really good for complex questions, so complex code questions, as well as maybe complex scientific questions. So overall, on the other parts, I don't think that there's much advantage on DeepSeek compared to other models. I think it does a pretty good job, but specifically on those, it does really well. Now, that being said, Google is coming out with Gemini thinking, which I think, if not better, is very close to the DeepSeek. So those are the two parts that I see advantage. And that being said, then we'll jump into the risks into exactly the things that DeepSeek is good at is where you end up having to feed it with such a sensitive data. And it's like, do you really want to do that? What is good at is complex code and complex scientific things. Imagine what you have to feed it in order to be helping you with that. Do you really want to be using that model for that?
Well, I think you can debate whether the cost numbers are apples to apples. DeepSeek, the published paper took kind of the last phase of the training, and I think there is a point of view which probably is justified that it's not an apples to apples comparison. That said, I think if you look at the benchmark numbers and the numbers and how it works, it's pretty good. It is probably the leading open source model. Now, the advantage of it is it's an open source model or an open weights model, and you can download it and run it yourself. So, there's this talk around, hey, what happens if you send your data to it and all that? Well, you can always download it and you can run it, for example, inside of VPC, inside a cloud provider, one of whom is us, or you can just run it in your local installation. And in that sense, whatever you're interacting with it, that isn't going anywhere. It's going to remain in your stuff. So In that sense, I think having the open source contributions actually become more competitive is a good thing because it makes the whole thing much more approachable for many more people.
Yeah, I think these points that both Melissa and Brighton have raised are critical points, and I'm sure we'll explore more about, the security concerns and the open source considerations and things like that. I think what I took away from the DeepSeek moment in the media was really about this invitation to consider some of the underlying assumptions that go into AI development, like can we democratize more what's happening behind the scenes in AI development? Can we do more with less? Can we build more efficient models that make more from less? And whether the model was actually built for less than 6 million as originally claimed, or more than 500 million, as it looks like it's probably closer to the truth, it really almost doesn't matter, because I think what is happening is that disparity and the discussion that ensues from it is pointing to something that's actually more interesting than the numbers, which is that invitation, as I said, to consider those factors, and also the need for transparency and trust within this industry.
If I can add one more thing to Jen, I think that very interesting what you said, Kate, and I was mentioning that to Jenna before too, is that I think in terms of public starting to use the DeepSeek, one thing that other models that the public has access to are not doing is to go into this explanation of how it came to the answer. So I think for a lot of people, being able to see that, and the first one that it did that into you can reach on your phone or any of that was DeepSeek, right? So people have this feeling like, oh, I'm breaking into the black box of AI. I'm actually understanding what it's doing to give me an answer. I feel a lot of the buzz around DeepSeek was because of that. Because even the cost of what you mentioned is more expensive than a Gemini. It's not that cheap unless you run yourself, which has other costs involved on that. Not everyone can do the infrastructure to download and run themselves. If you're just using as a cloud, it's more expensive than Gemini, even if they say that they train the model cheaper, right? But I think the big buzz was that into people start having this feeling of, I understand what it's doing. I can see what it's doing. So to your point, I think it really breaks this relationship of people, end users with the AI. That, in my perspective, is the big change of DeepSeek is bringing into, is also showing how people want to understand what AI is doing.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So, yeah, you touched on some of the privacy issues. Like if you want to get results from DeepSeek, you have to potentially feed it some pretty sensitive information. But due to the fact that it's open source, you can run DeepSeek locally. So, I guess my question is how should developers and companies think about the risks involved, and do those concerns still apply if someone is running it locally instead of using the online version?
If someone is using it within a secure environment, you're downloading the weights and you're running it. So you're not sending the data anywhere else. Yes, if you're using the app, you're sending your data and interaction somewhere else. So I think that really makes it possible to use it for a variety of things. And a lot of companies have started using it as well. And a lot of companies have made it possible to use it. And it actually, in many cases, we have seen within our cloud, within DigitalOcean, we actually have started using agentic AI in many applications. And it reduces the cost by a significant amount, and it performs pretty creditably with using OpenAI. So I think we are only going to see, and that is probably also the reason why it got so popular. We are only going to see this get better. But the reason that I'm more interested in is the community is going to build on it. Like this is a point in time, and then other people will have access to it, so they'll build to it. And I think Kate mentioned this. Um, one of the things that probably caught the attention of many people with DeepSeek is that they kind of rethought a lot of how models are built. and they did have some technical innovations. And so by making it open, now other people will incorporate this in their training. So, it lifts all tides. But more than that, people can then innovate on top of it. So it really kind of changes the paradigm, or it triggers a change in the paradigm that will lead to a lot more innovation. So, if you look at DeepSeek as an end, that's one thing, which I don't. If you look at DeepSeek as starting something new in terms of looking at the training problem differently, in terms of making some of these techniques available in the open source, in terms of letting others build on top of you, then it can be the start of a whole new rush of innovation that can only be beneficial to us. Okay. And then as these other models catch up, developed in other countries, many of them in the US and in open source, then you actually end up being able to use those techniques in a much more pervasive manner.
Yeah, I think
I love your point. Oh, sorry. I want to let Melissa, I would love to let you complete the round here. So I was just going to add something into what Bratin is saying and then hand it over to you if that's okay.
yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I love your point, Bratin, about the local versus hosted environment, and if you have a sort of in a sense a firewall around the usage, it's a very different type of risk. But I think there's some interesting considerations too in what we know and don't know about data handling and data training, and the kinds of things that have gone into the model. And they won't be the last questions that are being asked about this kind of thing. I think the only thing I wanted to throw in for listeners is as organizations are considering adopting various kinds of technologies, it's a good idea to think beyond capabilities of the tools and the limitations of the tools to broader sets of consequences and to governance of the full set of tools in ways that go beyond compliance. I think it's really a core component of responsible AI development and implementation to think holistically about this kind of thing, which I hope, Melissa, is actually teeing you up really well for points you would like to make.
Yeah, that's actually great, because that's the other part I was going to mention. That, yeah, there's a great point that was made about, if you're running locally, that part of the data privacy of where you're sending the data, where the data is coming from, you can block that. Not everyone can do that. Again, a lot of people that are starting with DeepSeek are the ones that, hey, I need some place to start, and they can't do that. So those should really be careful. Like, there's a whole data privacy going on there if you're using DeepSeek and is not on your private cloud area. But the other part is what is inside the model. So what we're going to use it for. If you're using for coding, does the bias matter that much? Yeah, maybe not so much, right? Because you're running code. But if you're running for other things related to language, now is super important, because let's say the opinions of the model may really impact. More deeper than that, imagine if schools start implementing DeepSeek to help as agent tutors for the kids, right? That's how they're going to learn. One thing we know about LLMs is always like, don't trust, check the output. Well, that's not so true anymore. A lot of people are learning. The way they learn is through the AI. So they're not going to check. They're learning through the AI. So what the AI is telling them is how they're going to learn about the subject. That's one part that, for me, in terms of the DeepSeek, not technical related things, code and all that, I'm not to worry about. But everything else where opinions matter, that's something that we should really be careful in terms of the question of application. Those applications I'll recommend to be very careful, if not completely stay away from DeepSeek.
I know we're still kind of in the middle of the hype cycle around this, so maybe this is hard to answer, but do any of you have predictions on kind of what role this will play in the future of AI-assisted development, or how it'll like kind of lower the bar for entry, given the lower training cost?
I think Bratin already.
I think if you look at this, So let's take a step back. What really, where really is AI headed? The first part of it, or the trigger point was ChatGPT, and it was really about understanding natural language and being able to use it to query and kind of answer questions and so on and so forth. I think if you see where it's headed next, it's more about agents. And what are these agents? Agents is, yeah, I can understand what you're telling me and so on, but I can also reason about how do I achieve a certain goal. Like, you're asking me to get something done. I can reason about all of the steps that are needed to get there. I can interact with the rest of the world to get the information I need to, and then perform those actions. So next step is probably, taking what was developed there and making it actionable, or making it agentic. And what that requires is, and I think Melissa was mentioning this, what that requires is also the ability to reason through long chains of complex commands. So that is one aspect of it. But the other aspect of it is, how do you make it cheap and easy to run, so that you can really make it pervasive? And I think what DeepSeek does, as well as this train of models, and there are the other OpenAI models as well, but what this set of models does is it really makes agents who can act on your behalf, who can be a real assistant, who can really be a real augmenter. It makes it a lot more practical and doable. Okay. And it just triggers the next wave of innovation of other companies who take this and say, what are the next set of things we can build? There's some stuff, that we are building in the agentic space in general, not necessarily with DeepSeek. And we've also made DeepSeek available at a very affordable price. It's 99 cents for a million tokens. And so if you think about that price, if you think of an average chat conversation, that's a 10-minute chat conversation. With that, that kind of a thing takes less than a cent. And so now you are getting to a point where you can really start thinking about, I can see pervasive use of these agentic kind of applications, and that is where it drives things.
I'm going to add to that. Those are great points. I think that that's also a great start of a new usage. But the part that we were talking before about the ways thinking, if you think about how maybe AI is going to change, you think about a different application of AI here. Today, we're using the output of the AI. You ask a question, you get the output. By having those models that actually show how they're thinking, you can leverage that part. Imagine a child is trying to learn how to solve a math problem. If you ask AI, it's going to go step by step. And like, oh, that's how I do that. So they may not be using the answer of the AI, but they're going to be learning to maybe how to think different about different things, or different parts of investigations that you didn't think before, because the AI is thinking about that. So maybe we're going to start seeing applications that are actually using more and leveraging more that part of the AI where it goes step by step into how it's doing things. Instead of today, most applications are just using the output of it. I think that's exciting, different applications of AI.
Yeah, that I agree. That's a very good point. That, it's almost like in some ways, almost like a tutor kind of a thing, where, I can imagine, just as you were talking, Melissa, I was thinking, you can basically have anyone, kids, whatever, ask questions, and in the thinking mode, you actually see how that's going, and it can teach you how you do some stuff. So yeah, I think it opens up a whole set of new avenues.
Yeah, I love that you started, Bratin, by talking about the sort of the evolution from the ChatGPT moment, right? Because it sort of broke things wide open with large language models and changed because it relied on natural language and such a fundamental human way of communicating and processing information. It was so natural, I think, for so many people to join in with this moment. And I think if we try to analyze why the DeepSeek moment, resonated the way that it did, I think Melissa's point is valid, that we have, seen this push toward the visual reasoning, walk me through how you're making this decision. And then I think also to your point, Bratin, that, the discourse around agentic AI has been pretty hot and heavy for the last year or two. And I don't think that anyone has had I shouldn't say anyone. I don't think that there's been a great consensus built in the industry or beyond the industry around, first of all, what agentic really truly means at a fundamental level and what we can expect in terms of our interactions with them. We started, I think, seeing some potential for that with this visibility into reasoning. And what's interesting to me about this is that, as I mentioned at the top in my introduction, I just published a couple of weeks ago a book called What Matters Next. And that book is fundamentally about making decisions, about human leaders making decisions about technology on behalf of other humans who are going to have the experiences with the technology. I think, one of the things that's inherent about agentic AI is that it inherently takes over at least one decision in the process, right? Like that's something that by definition it's going to do. I think that brings with it an invitation, as I said earlier, right? An invitation to reconsider how we're thinking about governance, how we're thinking about privacy, how we're thinking about trust and transparency. Like there's so many kind of embedded questions that starts to bring about. And what human in the loop means once we're in that sort of deployed kind of situation. There's just, I think, a lot of sort of downstream questions and considerations that come with that moment. And I think maybe many of us sort of glimpsed those questions, even if we hadn't articulated them fully. So I think it's going to be, especially having the DeepSeek moment precede the Paris AI Action Summit by the timing that it did. And so having that context present while many world leaders and industry leaders were gathered together to talk about regulations and standards and things like that, I think that really sort of set this context and maybe opened some parameters that needed to be part of those considerations so that we can be sure we're moving in the right direction with in terms of governance and oversight and development overall.
I think I'll just loop back into what you're both are talking about, the agent, because we're talking about data security and privacy. And I'll just make a point here that a lot of people forget. One kind of easy way when you're using an agent is that let the agent see all your data, use all your data so it can make the correct decisions. And what people forget is that AI is kind of like another SaaS, another app running in your environment. It's so easy to misconfigure something around the data. And then through the AI, you may end up really showing your data to the whole world, that anyone can go and fetch your data. So I think that one part, a lot of people focus on the AI, and they forget, wait, the AI needs the data. There's data coming in and data out. So make sure that all the data that is being used by the AI is also properly configured, and inside the AI is properly configured. So it's not too different than other SaaS data breaches where there's a misconfiguration and you expose everything to the public. That's very true for the AI. So that's something very important in terms of developers to keep in mind.
Preach it.
Yeah, I think that'll continue to be something that companies continue to try to figure out. I mean, this has been a talking point ever since ChatGPT came out a couple of years ago, and companies trying to figure out how to use these models while still making sure that they're not accidentally leaking sensitive information to the models. So yeah, it seems like that's something that companies will continue to focus on.
Well, and I think it's definitely a security and privacy consideration, to Melissa's point, and such an important point. It's also such an opportunity space, right? Like the opportunity we've seen around what layers of intelligent automation can do over top of, really, really unstructured data is pretty potent. But I think when we think about agentic AI operating over top of structured and unstructured data, like there's just an incredible amount of lift that it stands to get, and that our efficiencies and productivity stand to get from that. But I think we have to be very thoughtful and very, holistic about the way we are thinking about what belongs being included in that set, and how do we want to, just from an information architecture standpoint and a data data hygiene standpoint. You know, I think those are just as potent in terms of considerations for how what the results are going to be like for us as in addition to Melissa's really wonderful points about the privacy and security considerations that go with that.
Yeah, I agree. And this notion around, what is called responsible AI is a broad term now, but are you vetting or curating the data and making sure that you're getting rid of bias and toxicity and everything else that goes with it? Are you looking at the output? Do you have the right kind of guardrails? Um, and any of the other implications that Katie mentioned. I mean, they are so important, and they get so important as we look forward and see these agentic or generative AI applications could be automating a lot of work. And so then, these, as they become more pervasive, all the things that you and Melissa are talking about rightfully become front and center that we need to be looking at.
That's also why the reason that I'm director of AI on a SaaS security company because AI is a big thing now in security. We got to be using AI in security.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up on our time here. So even though I'm sure there's so much more we could discuss here, we're going to have to leave it at that for now. I want to thank all of you so much for coming on and sharing your knowledge with us.
Thank you for having us. It's wonderful to hear from
me.
everyone else on this panel as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was great.
Bye-bye.